welcome to the M.A.D.M.E.N podcast, a new series where we chat to some of the movers and shakers of the sport, science, worlds and society at large. And we're going to try and find a little humour and hopefully uncover some great yarns with a dash of hope in these difficult times. My name is Jonathan Fogarty. It's a privilege to be here. Joining me is the wonderful Mr. Simon Reeves. Simon, hello to you, my friend.
Jonathan, good morning to you. It is wonderful to be chatting to you. We met at the Beijing Olympics back in 2008. Our eyes locked across a crowded room, and my life has never been the same since.
That is truly frightening, but thank you. It's great to have you here. But probably much more interesting than you and I, mate, is these two wonderful ladies. Our first ever show, I have a really deep regard for these two, and I've had a long and interesting 20-year journey. But for them, it's the 20th anniversary of Sydney 2000 and their Olympic gold. What a privilege to welcome Natalie Cook and Kerri Pottharst. Ladies, hello and welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks. What a privilege to be on your first show. Like, that's awesome.
First and possibly last, Nat, but there you go.
The kiss of death. I want to take you guys back 25 September 2000, a remarkable day in so many ways. But I want to go back. Nat, we'll start with you first. You woke up that morning. Did you jump out of bed? Had you slept at all? What are your recollections of how that day got underway for you?
Well, I can't believe how clear the recollections are. It really is quite visceral within my body still after 20 years. And I know Kerri and I talk about it a lot because that's what we do from stage, but it really was a special moment. We had shifted locations from our original accommodation, which was in Randwick. And because the AOC, in their wisdom, probably didn't think we'd make the Olympic gold medal final, they put a road race cycling event on the day of our gold medal. So we couldn't get out of our accommodation and get to the beach. So they had to move us. So we were moved to the Bondi Swiss Grand at the time, the hotel, the 5-star hotel directly opposite. But we had to uproot everything, move our bedroom across to this hotel and try and make it as natural as we could. So the night was, Kerri and I, we had the game plan with Steve. We go through all that, and then you put your head on the pillow, all those emotions running through from excitement to nerves to fear to, visualizing how you're going to do it perfectly. But the interesting thing that happened was I spent the whole night awake reciting the gold medal winning speech. So I didn't think about digging, setting, spiking. I mean, clearly we'd done all that, but it was all about who I was going to thank when we were going to win this thing. And I didn't get a wink.
Wow. Kerri, was that your experience as well?
Yeah, pretty much. And yeah, I remember talking to Nat, it was maybe about a week or so after, and we both kind of asked each other, or someone said to us, same sort of question, what were you guys thinking of the night before? And Natalie said that to me, and I said, oh my God, I was awake too. And I was thinking about all the things that we were going to do, celebrate after, and who we were going to hang out with. And so we both had this vision of what it was going to be like afterwards. And, that really nailed it home for me when I thought, well, we both really believed that we could do it on that day. And that's as in sync as you could possibly get. I mean, we'd played matches and tournaments and events before where I don't think maybe one of us felt like that, but the other one didn't, or the other one was about 80% there. But I just know that obviously to have done that, but also because of that conversation we had afterwards, that we were both really on the same page. And that's why it didn't matter to us that we were shunted out of our accommodation. I mean, I think I remember, Nat, we came back from training the day before, and our coaches had, without us really knowing, they'd taken all our gear out of the room and they'd tried to set up the room in the Swiss Grand, kind of like we had it set up back where we were staying near Randwick. And so we were really thankful that they were in on the whole process with us. I mean, we were a team of 2, but we had 3 amazing coaches that were with us almost daily, a mindset coach, obviously our volleyball coach, and our conditioning coach. But we were really a team of 5, and we had a name. Our name was the Dream Machine, because our coach said, you know, all good teams have a name. Like, you guys are a team. Why don't we give ourselves a name? And we kind of went, well, there's the Dream Team and there's the Mean Machine. And we just went, all cut, paste, put Dream Machine together, and we became the Dream Machine. And we kind of explain it like it was our dream to turn our bronze into gold, and we were a machine of 5 people. Without one of us, I don't think we would have gotten there. We were all part of it.
And that bronze, of course, was at Atlanta, which was the first time that beach volleyball was played at the Olympics. You went your own ways after that. When was the time that you kind of thought, okay, we need to do this together ahead of Sydney?
Yeah, Atlanta was amazing in that, you know, I was 21. It was my, obviously our first Olympics, the first Olympics for the sport. And we were playing the powerhouses of Brazil that ended up coming first and second. And part of the reason why they never wanted 3 teams from one country was they didn't want the podium filled with the same country. Like, imagine Brazil first, second, and third, or the United States first, second, and third. So they made a rule 2 per country, and Brazil were quite dominant at the time. And we played a semi-final, so were America, but we managed to beat all 3 American teams in Atlanta, which was an amazing feat. But the one that unraveled me specifically was a Brazilian team that came second. And emotionally, I just wasn't ready for the weight of an Olympic Games, what that meant, the opposition and the effect they had on me when they stood 5 meters behind the service line with that look of, I'm just going to whip this at your head and I'm going to crush you. And I had never experienced anything like that, and I didn't cope too well. And so we got hammered in the semi-final, and I managed to pull myself back together, and Kerri and Steve were there as a great support to let me go through what I was going through to be able to, within 24 hours, win the bronze medal. So, you know, after that, you come out and you have all these expectations that you're going to go from third to second to first. You know, that's what you do. You have all these goals and dreams. And it really didn't go like that in 1997. We were terrible. We slid down to 17th and 25th and had a terrible year, which ultimately led to us splitting up. And I sort of went on a journey of self-discovery. I ran into our success coach that ended up coming with us to Sydney, called Kerri Ashley. And he sort of helped me through all these crazy things like firewalking and glass walking and parachuting. He sort of helped me discover that I could perform anyway, even if I was feeling quite fearful, and you just get on with it, and how you manage the emotional situations. And so I was on that journey playing with someone else, and Kerri had gone off and she was playing with Pauline. And then there was a moment that probably Kerri could talk to where it all changed, and, you know, we realised we were better together. So, Kez?
Over to you.
Yeah, well, obviously, I was watching Natalie throughout this time. I think we were apart, or maybe at least a year, not quite a year. I'm not sure exactly how long, but I was watching her, you know, with great interest. And her new partner were doing pretty crazy things at events. You know, they were standing around doing belly laughing and quacking like ducks. And I heard these stories of this success coach pushing them, you know, past what they thought they could do, and firewalking, and I just went, whoa, what's she doing, you know? But, you know, I'm safe over here, everything's going well, and we were doing well. Pauline and I were actually, you know, playing really well. We were a pretty good partnership. But what people didn't know, that behind the scenes of my partnership, we were just really incompatible. You know, traveling together, even playing together, even though we were winning, it was really emotionally difficult to kind of keep on, I don't know, performing your best when inside you just know it didn't feel right. It was really awkward. It's kind of like a marriage. I mean, we explain playing beach volleyball like a marriage, and it's like being trapped in a marriage that you know is not working. That's, even though on the outside everything is fine, that's kind of how I felt with Pauline. And she's a perfect, beautiful person, and we were just totally incompatible, you know. Anyway, and so I was watching Natalie, and I saw her growing in a sense. You know, I could feel her energy was changing, and we were overseas in France and in Marseille, and all of a sudden the other Australian teams were starting to drop like flies. You know, they were having knee injuries. So it was a kind of a succession of 2 players from different teams dropped with knee injuries, which meant there was an opportunity for a bit of a reshuffle. And at that point, Natalie and I had already, I think, been whispering to each other, and we just went, should we do it? And we thought, yep, let's do it. And I'll never forget the first moment we were warming up for our first match. We were able to reshuffle the teams. Natalie and I could play together for that tournament, and we were just warming up, and we were just looking at each other, and it was just like, oh, I'm back, you know, you're back, like we're together again. And it just felt like, you know, like, again, like a relationship where you split up and you realize what's missing, and you come back together, and it's perfect. And it felt like that from the get-go. And we came second in that World Tour event. We won a silver medal, played amazing, and that was just like, yep, we're good to go. And we went off from there, and we won so many medals leading up to Sydney 2000, but we didn't crack a gold medal. We had many silvers and bronzes in our pocket, but no golds.
Well, it's really interesting and that's a great yarn. Natalie and I were at a friend's wedding about a year out from Sydney. She may or may not remember that. And, you know, we're chatting, standing around as you do at weddings. And I said, oh, how do you, the exact question I forget, but it was something along the lines of, you know, how do you think you're going to go in Sydney? The expectation's pretty immense. And Natalie, you were laser-like. You were like, oh, we will win the gold medal. I remember walking away from the conversation going, gosh, that's a level of self-confidence or arrogance that I just couldn't process that. How a year out from an Olympic Games, you know, you see sportsmen and women nowadays saying, oh, you know, all the preparation is there and I feel like we're in a good space, and, you know, and all those platitudes. But Nat, you were just incredibly centered and incredibly focused. And what I probably mistook for arrogance was just that self-belief.
Yeah, and I think it is a fine line, John. It's like the fine line between arrogance and confidence. And I remember one of the stalwarts of beach volleyball at the time, Chico Jones, coming up to me and sitting me down at the Stanford Plaza Hotel in Adelaide after an event in Glenelg, running me through that. Like, there's a fine line between confidence and arrogance, and you're walking it. I'm like, dude, I'm the only one walking in my shoes, and I just got hazed at an Olympic Games up here, my first time round, and I'm backing Hurek in his whole methodology, which sort of comes from a Tony Robbins philosophy, right? It's all about finding your posture, finding your belief, going from belief to another level of knowing. And this is a part that most athletes still to this day are afraid to do, and that is speak about it out loud. Because as soon as I told you that, I walked away going, holy crap, I have to train harder, eat better, sleep better, study harder on my opposition. And I'm now telling people that I'm going to do this. So you hold yourself at a next level accountability. And otherwise, if you're halfway teetering, the option when you get into the Olympic final is you crap yourself, which you do anyway. But after years of training and building my belief that I will do this, it helps you pop through the other side. It is quite a phenomenal feeling. And I think this whole self-confidence thing we see in teenagers and kids right now, this is kind of the secret. It really is about backing yourself 100%. And the secret of it is you can have a plan B, but don't tell yourself that, right? So the plan B is what happens if I fall. That's okay. Have a team around you to support you. But you've got to go like you only have plan A, and you've got to back yourself in. And a lot of my Olympic friends were like, stop telling people you're going to do that. I'm like, no, we're going straight through. And thankfully it worked.
Well, history will show it was successful. Kerri, to you, you know, the moment you're in the stadium, it's that day. You're playing one of the great teams of any era, in my humble view of our sport of beach volleyball, and Shelder and Adriana from Brazil, who probably had a right to favouritism. As the game progressed and as the contest progressed, what were your thoughts and feelings? And was there a point where you two looked at each other and said, you know, we've got this? Did you think it from the start, or what do you recall of the journey through the match itself?
I think the key was that we didn't think we've got this. I think, like Natalie just said, we knew we had it. We just, when I look back at some of the footage, it wasn't a kind of like an up and down emotional roller coaster. We're like, yeah, come on, let's do this. Da, da, da. It was just like steely focus, like on my face anyway. It was Natalie was orchestrating the crowd and having a great time, but that's Nat, and that's what worked for Nat. But what worked for me was I just had this steely focus. I almost blocked the crowd out. I could hear the crowd. It almost killed us in our first match. I mean, our first match, we walked out onto the sands of Bondi, and you know, we'd both been to the toilet a half a dozen times. We were so nervous, and we were playing the lowest ranked team, Mexico, who was in our competition, and normally would have beaten them within 20 minutes. Well, this match just went on and on and on, and our knees were shaking, and we were just so nervous. We were just really clinging on to this match, and it was, you know, we had to get to 15 points. I think it was about 11 all before we went, or before we actually made a few points and just kind of went over the line and won that game. But afterwards, we were just freaked out by what had happened. We thought we'd prepared for everything. So, you know, in the next few matches, we gained that confidence of being able to work with the crowd, and we also sought out the help from other athletes. And this is what, you know, we really admire about being in an Olympic environment, is there are so many other athletes that you can lean on and get experience from. And so we went into the Olympic Village and talked to Pat Rafter, one of the, you know, obviously our most famous tennis players, and talked to him about what it was like coming back to Australia and having the weight of expectation on his shoulders and being able to perform in front of a big crowd, because that's how we felt. We felt like everyone expected us. We expected us. We said we were going to win. And how we were going to deal with this expectation with the crowd that we'd never experienced before, that bigger crowd cheering for us, because normally we're playing in other countries like Brazil, where they're swearing at us in Portuguese, throwing things at us from the crowd, and yelling, like when you throw the ball up to serve at the baseline, you know, the minute you throw the ball up in the air, they're screaming, and you're like, whoa! You know? So here we were, you know, trying to deal with that, and it was really good. We sat down with Pat and Leighton Hewitt and Renee Stubbs and some of the other tennis players that were in the village then playing for Australia at the Olympics, and we just said, you know, what was it that helped you? And I remember Pat saying something to me about really kind of almost building a cone of silence around the court. This is what I took away from it anyway. It was like a cone of silence, and I imagined Get Smart. Remember, you know, the Get Smart, you know, and being in the cone of silence, that, you know, there's stuff going on outside, but here it's just me and Nat in this cone of silence. And he said, just make sure you have a lot of eye contact, that you're touching, you know, clapping hands, doing whatever you do, and be together with Nat. And so as we got through to the final, that cone of silence got stronger and stronger, and I had this real focus just on the court. I knew the crowd was there, but it wasn't affecting me anymore. And, you know, when that last ball kind of landed out and we knew that we'd won, I hit the sand, I hit the deck, and it was, I think back now, and I think it was almost like a fear of looking up, because I knew that cone of silence had kind of shattered. And now I'd have to really look at the crowd. And I am, you know, even though I speak on stage and we play in front of crowds, I'm still very self-conscious about being the center of attention. And here I was, you know, and Natalie's on top of me going, get up, Ludo, we've done it. And, you know, and I was just like, oh my God, I can't believe it. And And the funny thing was, it was kind of like, I can't believe everything we planned, because, you know, we could talk for hours on what we did in the lead up, but everything kind of led to that point, and it all worked. And all the crazy stuff we did, you know, it actually worked. And now, you know, our dreams had come true. So it was a pretty incredible moment.
So you both have that incredible moment in the sun, and then a few hours later, somebody called Kathy comes along and does something pretty good that night.
Yeah. Ironically, I had tickets. I bought tickets because, you know, in the ballot beforehand, I thought if there was what we learned from Atlanta was to get out and experience it. The last thing you want to do is be an Olympian and not see any Olympic Games, right? So one of the things to do was to buy some tickets. So I, of course, bought Kathy Freeman. I bought the relay, men's relay that won the smashing them like guitars against the US. So I was at that. So, of course, I have these tickets to Kathy Freeman that I can't go. We are now doing drug tests and press conferences and you know, the TV's got us, and then we're at icebergs pouring drinks at the bar and bikinis on the outside of our jeans and dancing. So there was no Kathy Freeman happening for me. So I randomly had 2 tickets to Kathy Freeman. My parents didn't want to go either because it was quite a distance to get out there, and they wanted to celebrate with us. So I ended up handing these over to 2 randoms on the street near a bus stop at Bondi going, anyone want to go see Kathy Freeman? So we then go about our celebration. We watch it on TV. It's fantastic. So our fame lasted about 3 hours. And Kerri and I won. This is a fact not many people know, but I'm here to tell you that we made Kathy famous because we won the 99th gold medal for Australia, making her the 100th. Wow. And that is why she is so famous today. So she has us to thank for that. And the next day at the press conference when we were there with Kathy Freeman, there might have been 200 reporters, and they were all there for Kathy.
Wow.
Yeah, bigger. It was like question for Kathy, question for Kathy, question for Kathy, about 10, 20 of them. Question, Tatiana was with us, so she'd won her silver medal in the pole vault. Maybe 5 for Tatiana, 1 for Kerri and Nat. Back to Kathy. Yeah. I remember I took a photo of the press conference sitting on the desk there because, you know, it was like we were at Kathy's press conference, but that's okay.
What a
and
day.
your questions are much more insightful because the reporters asked Kathy, how did you run so fast? I'm like, what? Really?
Well, one of my favourite reminiscences of that day was I was lucky enough to be there trying to help amp the crowd when Nat couldn't do it, and trying to explain to the 10,000 people in the stadium every day what was going on. And, you know, right at the end of that beautiful moment, Simon, I'm doing the PA announcing, and our producer said, you seem to know these 2 ladies pretty well. Why don't you whip out with the microphone and get a really quick reaction just as they'd won the gold medal before, you know, the real media could get there and that sort of thing. And I made the fatal mistake, I'm sure Nat remembers it, of actually physically giving the microphone, you know, to Nat Cook about 3 minutes, if that, after she's just won gold. And she's gone off and thanked her kindergarten teacher from Townsville, and the lady that looked after her dog for a week while she was on camp. Her and Kerri was part of it as well. Having this
ironing lady.
Yeah,
all I kept saying was, I can't believe it. And Nat kept grabbing the mic back off me. Okay, well, if you don't want to say anything, I've got more people to thank.
What we didn't realise at the time is we were transgressing every international Olympic broadcast protocol, and I had a guy in my ear screaming, saying, take the mic off her, take the mic off her. I'm hardly going to grab the microphone off the gold-winning Australian Golden Girls in front of their 10,000 adoring fans. So, you know, they delayed broadcasts into the US because they stayed live with Nat and Kerri. And boy, I copped it for years and years after that. And it wasn't until about 10 years ago that I realised that the producer could have just switched the microphone off back at the desk, but he wanted me to be the bad guy. So I regret nothing. It was just a beautiful moment. Do you remember, you know, kind of the euphoria? Does that feeling ever really leave you?
Probably the euphoria does, that level of adrenaline and excitement. I mean, it's still recall, but like I talked about before, the visceral feeling of stepping out on the sand and all of those things is still there. The rush and everything, but that heightened level, I don't think, unless you're actually in the moment, when the last ball goes out and the line judge signals out and the referee closes the match, unless that, I've spent my last 20 years trying to find a moment like that. It hasn't happened, but I do absolutely recall that interview moment. Well, not really an interview, Fogo, you handed the microphone, or I stole it, and then I kept turning around so that you couldn't get it. So, it really was a beautiful moment. And as I found out too, no one really gets that opportunity. So I'm grateful that we were friends and you were comfortable enough to come out and ask us a question or two.
It was great.
But we had, as I told you at the beginning, I'd recited this speech. I had to get it out. I had to get everything out.
You sure did. You sure did.
That's in every Olympic broadcast manual now. Never give the microphone to Natalie Cook from that day. Now, I was with my dear partner Linda and our daughter Stella living in Botswana during the 2000 Sydney Olympics, somebody who has been an Olympics fan since I was a kid. And it leads us to the next issue, I think, that during the 2000 Olympics, the 800 metres final, the men's 800 metres final, a runner from Botswana, a young man called Glody Dube, who actually grew up in the town where we were living, this tiny town at the bottom of the Okavango Delta called M.A.D.M.E.N, he made the final. He had a Scottish coach from the school that he went to, the high school that he went to. He'd run along the river in front of the place we were living in for the years leading up to that. And his homecoming was one of the great days of my life. We watched you guys win the gold on our little satellite TV in Botswana, and then we watched Kathy, of course, and we had local people come and join us. We actually went and got them and said, come and watch this. This will be a big moment for Australia. But then Glody's homecoming a couple of weeks after Sydney was hair-raising stuff. They packed the high school out with about 1,000 kids from around the local area, and the partying went on for hours afterwards. So the Olympics means a lot to Jonathan and I. We've been lucky to go to a couple as commentators. Of course, the Olympics, Kerri and Nat, I know means so much to you, and you've played a huge role in it in this country and are a part of our folklore. But why is the Olympics still relevant, do you think, Nat? I'll go to you first because I know you have a role in hoping to bring them to Southeast Queensland in 2032.
Yeah, that's my next focus of the next 12 years, really, is that excitement. I feel it. It's 12 years out. It's 3 Olympic cycles away for a nation and a region that may have the opportunity again like Sydney did. It really turned the international spotlight onto Sydney. It was the greatest tourism ad you could ever see. It really is the largest sporting event on the planet. It will still keep that. The fact that it's 4 years apart is probably one of the things that makes it so exciting, but also the instant gratification of people today. They want to see it all the time, which is why the IOC developed the Olympic Channel, so you can ultimately watch Olympic moments and Olympic stories every day, all day. But it's the beauty of that moment. Can you prepare yourself as a human being in your body, mind, and spirit to perform on one given day or a series of days every 4 years? And that's what we love about sport. You know, people that are supposed to win, as John said, our Brazilian team was the favourites. They had, on paper, they probably should have won, but nobody had seen our piece of paper, right? So all of these people train all over the world, even like Eric the Eel, the swimmer that was in Sydney 2000, and the Kenyan runners, and nobody sees that. And then all of a sudden there's a spotlight for 2 weeks every 4 years where we get to see the best in the world. And now what we're doing in Australia is a program called Olympics Unleashed, which is sending our Olympians into schools and communities to not only share their stories, but also share the lessons and how to build resilience, how to set goals, how to back up when things don't go to plan. So we're installing Olympic values into the community, and that's why Southeast Queensland is so excited to bring an Olympics back to Australia, because of what that might do. Plus, we actually need to get people moving. We actually need people to start exercising because it's good for your mental and physical health. So I don't know if that answered any of your question. That's my rant on the 2032 opportunity. We're very excited in Queensland. And of course, right now there's other matters that we have to deal with around COVID-19. But I do know that our state and our Premier still has, even from the back of her mind, a little bit of forward focus around 2032. Did well.
Jono, question from you.
Yeah, very well. I'm interested in, and Kerri, you as well, that, they've added esports, breakdancing, that some of these newfangled things that they've added. I mean, what are your thoughts? Are the Olympics still the same Olympics that you guys strive for in 96 and 2000 and 2004, or have they changed, or at the heart of it, Kerri, is it still the same?
Oh, look, I would have to say it's still the same. I mean, Nat just gave a great explanation of why the Olympics are so valuable. I mean, especially in Australia, we just love our sports people, whether it's an Olympic sport or any sport. We love sport and we love the stories. So I kind of one day I was thinking about, and I think maybe we should divide into two Olympics. An Olympics where we judge somebody, and an Olympics where you make points. So all the judging sports, or the gymnastics and the synchro swimming and all those things where they're being judged by someone, and then something where you're actually competing for points. But look, anything, like Nat said, to get people moving, whether it's, I don't know. I don't even know what sports are on the table, but I think an Olympics is an Olympics. I think Nat just put it brilliantly.
Yeah, we're seeing, and that's what the IOC is doing, is making new urban sports. So we've got sport climbing, surfing, skateboarding. We could see athletes as young as 10. They were talking about Sky from the UK, her name is a skateboarder, qualifying for the Tokyo Olympics. By the time she gets there now, she might be 11 or 12, but there are no rules around this. Yeah, way too old. Yeah. And the audience on surfing and skateboarding and the way that we watch sport these days and absorb our content is changing. The IOC, normally very slow to change, has made new norms, new rules, and really are trying to listen to the people of what they want to see. At the end of the day, when you've got gold medals on the line from the best athletes all over the world, it will always be relevant.
Good segue for changing sport. Over the last, I'd say 3 or 4 years in particular, women's sport has come such a long way in Australia with AFLW, with the Southern Stars. We get 87,000 people to a World Cup T20 final between India and Australia, which truly was one of the great sporting events of recent history, I think, not just for the crowd, but for the atmosphere around it, for the quality of the game as well. How does it make both you feel as people who were partly sort of pioneers along the way on this road to be seeing women's sport in primetime television and doing so well in so many areas?
I might take that one. So obviously, it's amazing. It couldn't be not amazing. It's fantastic to all the opportunities for female athletes now. And, I remember when I was a young person and, growing up early teens, I was really self-conscious as a teenager. I was already 6 foot tall and, I have a funny last name that you take the H and the T away and you're left with an arse. Am I allowed to say that? And I was teased a lot in school for those things, for being tall and for having a funny name, and I was very sensitive. So when I discovered sport, I found not only an environment where it was good to be tall and I was patted on the back for my height, I found a really supportive environment, somewhere where I could thrive and do something that made me feel good, made other people feel good in a team. And so, sport was just so valuable for me as a young female. And now with all the opportunities around, I mean, if I had I have a son, but if I had a daughter, Natalie, or any kids, I would just be pushing them and encouraging them to play as much sport as possible. There are so many great opportunities, and also opportunities for young women to forge a career in sport now too, which was really difficult for us when we first started. I mean, our sport still has not a lot of funding from the Sports Commission or from, compared to some of the bigger sports, obviously. And so as athletes, there's not many athletes in our sport now. I think we've got 2 females that can actually make a living from sport and or from our sport. So, to have these opportunities for women to earn an income, be it a small income to start with, maybe in the future it will equal the men, is fantastic. But also the beauty of our sport was from the very beginning, we had equal prize money. So we weren't really exposed to the inequalities of male, female. In a sense, women's beach volleyball, people sometimes said to me, "Oh, do men actually play beach volleyball?" I was like, yeah, sorry, they do.
We had a secret weapon though, Kez. We really did. Our bikini won over every day. So until the boys were prepared to wear their bikini or their mankini, we were going to win.
Yeah, exactly. And we used that in a sense that we weren't exploiting ourselves, and whether we would have been putting pictures of ourselves on Instagram, if there was an Instagram back then, whether we would have been doing that, the way we were doing it at the time was literally ringing the media and saying, "Hey, come and take a picture of us at the beach. We've got a World Championships we're going to next week. Can you come and do a story on us?" And they'd probably be thinking, like Nat said, "Oh, girls in bikinis," and they'd come take pictures. I mean, we've got some of the funniest photos, like taking a shower. We had a photo of us in the shower at the beach, getting all the sand off. That was the photo that went on the back page of the news. And I was buried in the sand at St Kilda once, just with my head and my hand out. So it wasn't a bikini shot, but we'd do back then. We'd do pretty much anything,
whatever it took.
To get some media. But these days, I think the athletes have got it a little bit easier. There's a lot of opportunity for them with social media that they can really kind of get their brand out there and, like I said, earn an income. And why not? Why not?
This delay, obviously, Tokyo 2020 is no longer Tokyo 2020, although the name stays the same. Both of you ladies have mentored heavily and coached and played a role in developing the next generation of athletes in your sport. How do you see more broadly the impact on these young athletes that now they've got to push off for 12 months, all of the key milestones and activities, and what's the impact, Nat, do you think on the young athletes, particularly for this delay?
Yeah, I think the initial shock and the disappointment of it being moved, would have lasted days or a week or two for some athletes. But once most athletes are pretty tuned mentally to refocus and reframe and pull the positive out of it. And if they're not, their coaches will be trying to have them do that, because clearly they need to keep them focused on 2021. So once they got over that, a lot of them found, oh, good, I can have another year to get stronger, or I had a bit of an injury and this will give me time to get over it. So whilst the timing was probably quite difficult, it was in that high pressure environment where most people are trying to qualify. Those that have already qualified, the IOC has said they will keep their spot. So they're all like, oh, this is great. I just can have a 3-week holiday, when they were actually going to be in their final approach into Tokyo. So some are quite anxious that have still got to qualify. I know our beach volleyball girls have a few events left to go, so there's a little niggling unknown there. Our swimmers will have to qualify in June next year, so they've really had to move their program quite a lot. But they've all enjoyed the break, and right now they're getting a bit anxious. They want to get back into pools and back into the beaches and back onto training. So that's really the thing that's keeping them at bay right now, is when am I going to get back on the court to start moving again?
I also think that if you look at it as two different types of athlete, one athlete that was kind of ready and had the belief like Natalie and I did leading up, those athletes probably are going to suffer a lot more because they were so, they were on that pathway and they were almost there. And then the athletes that perhaps had that fear, the doubt that, oh, am I ready? Could I possibly win a medal? Could I possibly qualify? They're the ones that have probably, they're filled with the relief. I reckon there's a lot of relief. And then there's also a lot of disappointment. And then there's the athletes, especially females, that perhaps thought this is my last go and I'm going to then have a baby, or I'm going to, somebody who's just hanging on physically. So there's going to be, I think there are a range of emotions from athletes. I think, it'd be interesting to see which ones, and like Nat said, the ones that have already qualified, it'd be interesting to see how that affects their mindset and whether they actually do very well. To look back and go, okay, here's all the bunch of athletes that were qualified. How many of them actually won medals? Did that year of going, sit back and go, oh, I've qualified, that relaxed year, did that actually affect their performance a year on? So yeah, a lot of interesting things to come.
Yeah, look, it's cost me, at 58, I was all set for Tokyo. 59, it's forget it. I've just given up the whole process. Now, look, Kerri gave such a great answer before, talking about sort of young female athletes. Nat, let's step outside the lanes or outside the court, as it were, with this question. And that is, I think Australia finally got same-sex marriage right eventually, after a long and bumpy road towards the end of 2017, when there was probably a lot too much heartache for a lot of people. How do you speak to that and your journey with Sarah and your gorgeous daughter now, Jordan, as well? What would you like to say to young people who might be watching or listening to this?
Yeah, it really is an amazing time for us in Australia right now with the law changing 2 years ago. Sarah and I have been together 20 years and it wasn't, I never hid it, but I wasn't outwardly open. So if ever I was asked a question, I would talk about it, I would tell people, but I wasn't really one at the front line sort of trying to get anything changed. But I absolutely, out of respect for everyone that did, Sarah and I remarried. So we've been married twice, once legitimately and once illegitimately. And so we've had 12 years ago in Queenstown, and then 2 years ago at the Sunshine Coast in the hinterland of M.A.D.M.E.N. And that one, Sarah and I sort of looked at each other like, do we need to get married again? And we did it for the people at the front line that were fighting so hard for that yes vote and seeing what it meant to people. Sarah and I have lived our lives as though we were married, as though we were equal. And as you probably heard from the mindset before, that's how I lived my life. I knew that our relationship was as important and as important as we made it. And so I encourage anyone listening that maybe not in a space, maybe your family's not approving. And Sarah's dad still doesn't approve 20 years on. So we still face that, but Sarah's respectful of that, but from my point of view, that's his challenge. That's not mine, that's his challenge. And there are still people out there, even though it has become legal, that are still feeling anxious, that are still feeling bullied. And my piece of advice is to surround yourself with the people that are on your team, that support you, and try and remove yourself either quickly or gradually from the people that don't support your choices and your right to choose your sexuality. So a big hug to everyone suffering, to anybody that's suffering, and just find someone that you can that can be your rock and your support and uplift, and get someone on your team that loves you.
Love that answer.
Well said, great answer. But I'm worried you're setting yourself up for failure, having to remember 2 wedding anniversaries. That's fraught with trouble. Talk me through that.
Well, I'm okay. I have a Rain Man brain. I have a numbers brain, a photographic brain. But Sarah has just had her birthday on the 30th of April, and it's our wedding anniversary too, and she forgot that. So remembered her birthday, forgot her wedding anniversary, but I reminded her that that's my role in life.
I would like to talk to you both about legacy and role models. You both individually sort of wrote books about this experience. You're very, very different. Kez, to you first, does that bring a pressure, being seen as a role model constantly? I know, you are scrutinized and measured differently by the things you say publicly in the media, for example, the things that maybe some of us could get away with. Does that bring a pressure, and do you feel that's a role you have to perform?
I don't feel a pressure. I just feel a responsibility. And I remember when it dawned on me that exact responsibility, it was a moment at the Atlanta Olympics. And I'm not one for gathering autographs of famous people. I love to see famous people and maybe get a photo with somebody, but I never was an autograph hunter. But at the Atlanta Olympics, I had this Australian flag. And I was just getting the Australian athletes to sign it. It was going to be my memento of being at the Olympic Games, with no thoughts of what was going to be ahead in the future. And I remember having the flag in my bag in the food hall. And I saw an athlete who I'd admired from afar. I'd never obviously met her. And that was a tennis player from the US, Monica Seles. Sure. And for those people who can remember, Monica Seles had actually been stabbed in the back at a match while she was sitting down for a timeout. And it was a horrible thing to happen. She was injured. She came back and she was competing at the Olympics after this event. I don't know how long before the Olympics. Maybe it was a year or so before when it happened. But she obviously had gone through this feeling of fears and all that. Imagine having to sit down again at your first match after being through that, wondering, who's going to come running at me from behind. Anyway, I really admired her strength and the fact that she'd made it to the Olympics. And I kind of said to myself, I've got to go and ask her for an autograph. Like, I'm just going to do it, And so I walked up and I actually had to stand in line because there were a few people, and all Monica wanted to do was have her lunch that day. And I kind of felt bad, but I went, you know what, I'm going to do it. This is just one person that's so important to me. And so I got to the front of the line, and she was sitting there, and she was sitting down and I was standing, and I kind of put the flag in front of her and said, "Hi, Monica, my name's Kerri, I'm from Australia. Do you mind signing my flag?" And she kind of just went, and then pushed it to the side. What I actually did for those people listening was she signed it and then she pushed it to the side. She made no eye contact with me. She said nothing to me. And I walked away with my tail between my legs, and I felt really disappointed. And that's when it dawned on me, and that's just stayed with me for like 25 years. It dawned on me how important and how much of an impression that we as athletes who are known for having some success, how much we can make on a younger athlete or anybody in society. And Natalie and I both, obviously, we're out there, we're talking and we're on stages all the time. And I make it a point that everybody who comes to me and says, "Hey, that was great," or "I've got a question for you, I just wanted to say hello and shake your hand," that I make eye contact, that I give that person some time, and that I'm really genuine and nice to that person, even though I'm like, maybe I'm scared of them, or they're weird or whatever. I make sure I give them my time because of the impression that I make. So I feel that's a responsibility. And I take that, I love that. I actually think it's great, because I really think that as athletes, we have the ability to move mountains, to inspire change, to be, the voice for people, because people look up to us. And I think that doesn't come lightly to me. I wouldn't put my name behind something or do something that would harm the environment or anybody. If I at all possible, I always make sure that I use, my, I don't know if you want to call it fame or voice for something that's inspiring and helpful.
So I'm the opposite. I'm the autograph hunter and the selfie hunter, and Kez likes to bet me and poke me to go and get those photos. She's like, "Go over there and do that." Of course, off I go. It was part of my preparation for how to not be afraid of things, right? How do you do it anyway? And my most famous one was probably in the Rio Olympics. where Kez sent me a message saying, go and get Matthew McConaughey's selfie. And he was in a secure section. And I'm like, I'm sitting there sweating under my armpits going, this is a challenge. And so I managed to get my $100, which you still haven't paid, but I will get that off you now that it's live on, now that it's on podcast. So I get through, he's sitting on the edge and he's watching the swimming, and I sit down right next to him on the step, not on the seat, the grandstand seat, on the step. And I'm like, I do this little whisper, my heart's racing now. My heart's beating really fast. I'm like, hi, exactly the same. I'm Nat from Australia. I play beach volleyball. Can I have a selfie? And so I got that photo. I've got Usain Bolt from Rio, one of my favourite athletes, and a similar story to Kerri, but I learned how important it is, and you only get a first impression once. So how do you give the best first impression? You may only meet people once. I'll never meet Matthew again. The one that does it the best, in my opinion, is Roger Federer. He is so present. He gives you time. Even when he's so busy, he's been pulled away. He's got locked eye contact. He actually asks you a question. He's interested in you as well. And I think he's a great role model for me and how I do it with other kids. But because you brought up the sexuality, Simon, I'm going to say in London, I was walking through one of the malls in London, and this lady comes running up to me, and Sarah's with me, my mum's with me, and everyone thinks she wants an autograph. You know, it's my 5th Olympic Games, beach volleyball. She goes, oh my God, Nat, I'm so excited I found you. My son's gay. Like, okay.
Very good.
And so now I'm giving advice to parents. I'm like, how are you feeling with that? Are you doing okay?
That is a brilliant story. I think it's such a tribute to both of you as well that, you know, one of your books hasn't been from Kerri. What a biatch Nat Cook was, you know, telling the home truths. It's a great testament to your enduring friendship over 20 years. The question that Jonathan had written down, and I'm stealing from him right here, is how will you celebrate on September 25, 2020?
Well, we're trying to work that out now. I don't know whether we should say something that we probably shouldn't give it all away.
Don't want to give it away.
We had big plans, and then of course COVID has changed how we do things, and we were hopeful that maybe by September things might have shifted, but clearly it doesn't take a rocket scientist to work out that we might be somewhere near Bondi. Right. We might have a big celebration with food and drink and friends and family. And there's a few other little things we're working on behind the scenes, but we'll wait till September before we unveil those. Otherwise, Kathy Freeman might take some of them, and we're not having that.
Yes.
5 hours later.
And we might, hang on a sec, we might finally leave some sort of legacy physically and perhaps in the air for the future.
Oh, that's a good promo.
Ooh.
I thought it was going to be ceremonial $100 being handed from Kerri to Nat for the Matthew McConaughey photo. Anything other than that would be a win, I think, Nat, for you. So,
John, I'll actually invite you down to commentate that handover. That would be fabulous.
Be there in a heartbeat for that.
Just don't give her the microphone, Jonathan. Okay, for God's sake.
That ship has sailed. All right. Well, unfortunately, I could talk to you guys all day. This has been wonderful. I think, conscious of time, we will wrap it up. But I think, Nat, Kerri, it's been an absolute delight. You ladies have been incredible role models, not just for your sport, not just for the different communities that you serve, but you've been just wonderful role models for sportsmen and women in Australia for the last 20 years. I hope the anniversary is all you want it to be for those of us who are either lucky enough to be there in the sand or on the other side of the world watching it, where, you know, it's a part of Australian sporting folklore that we cherish. And I hope that you know that you are valued and important members of the Australian sporting pantheon. And we thank you for it. So that's all I had to say. Simon, over to you.
Most definitely. You're poster athletes for resilience. We didn't even get to talk about Kerri's terrible knee injury back in 1992, which she came back from. And I know both of you have obviously dealt with so much over the years on and off the court as well. And I think all of Australia fell in love with you that day. And I don't think that love affair really has changed in any way since then. You're still as refreshingly honest and authentic. And that's something that I try to say to young people. If you just be authentic, be yourself. And you, Nat and Kerri, are exactly that to this very day. But I have written down, never give Natalie the microphone. Okay.
And Simon, on that, I have to have the last word, although Kerri, I think, will take the last word.
I was just going to say, I'll speak second to last, so Nat can have the last word. I just want to thank you guys for doing this. It's always great to be able to share stories with everybody, the world, about, what we've experienced together. John, thank you for your friendship's been amazing over the last 20 years. I've had the pleasure of commentating a couple of Olympics and doing stuff with you over the years. It's been awesome. Simon, welcome on board to our new team here. And also just the last word on my friendship. You mentioned the friendship with Nat that has endured over, all this time. Nat and I, like sisters, we bleed sport, volleyball, Olympianism, whatever you want to call it. Sport can bring bonds beyond family, and that's kind of how I feel about Nat. And, thanks. I get emotional now.
Yeah, and especially after we haven't had hugs for so long, this is really a moment of hug. I do miss hugs. John, thank you for being the voice of volleyball for the last 25 years. It really isn't a volleyball match of significance unless you are there to commentate. And now, since Kerri retired, Kerri being the voice of volleyball as well, people say to me, "Oh, do you commentate?" I'm like, "No, I leave that to the pros." That's Kerri and John. So thank you. To Simon, watching Sydney from a little TV in a hut in Botswana must have been a bit surreal. But to hopefully to share the stories and to come back, and this 20-year celebration we'll experience this year will bring some of that back. I do want to comment on the authenticity. I do think the most important thing over my 20 years is to learn to be yourself. It is too hard to be someone else and to back it up day after day. The easiest thing to do is be yourself every day, and you can't get that wrong. So that's my biggest piece of advice to the young people listening is go your own way, do it yourself, be yourself, and high five, big hugs to you all. Thanks for having us on the show. Love you, Kez, and like a sister, and if I don't see you before, it'll be September 25th, and we'll break the rules. We'll have a hug.
We're coming to Bondi.
Very good. Well, thank you. Hope you've enjoyed it. Wherever you're listening, wherever you're watching, we've just been blessed with two wonderful ladies telling us some great stories. So I hope you've enjoyed our first podcast. Until we meet again, on behalf of Simon and I, thank you.